We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 5b. And the previous summer, Rav Huna said that chuppah can create Kiddushin from a kal v'chomer, and the Gemara is in the middle of explaining that kal v'chomer. If we find by kesef which doesn't complete the kinyan, but it's able to create a Kiddushin, so chuppah which can create a complete kinyan, which can complete the kinyan in terms of nesuin, chuppah shagomeres, chuppah which can complete the kinyan, eino din shetikna. Doesn't it make sense to say that it can also create the initial kinyan of erisin? But the Gemara says you can't learn from kesef because mala kesef shekein podin bo hekdeshus u'meiser sheni. What's unique about kesef is it can also be used to redeem hekdesh and meiser sheni. So you can't learn chuppah from kesef. But the Gemara says bia tochiach, bia can prove the other way because bia does create a kinyan in terms of kiddushin, but it's not used to redeem hekdesh and meiser sheni. But the Gemara says mala bia, but bia is also unique shekein kona biyavama because bia can be used as a kinyan by yavama in terms of yibum. And the Gemara says kesef yochiach, but kesef can prove the other way that cannot be used by Yibum. The Chazar Din, we can go back and forth. Lo roizeh karoizeh. V'lo roizeh karoizeh. This one's not like this one, and this one's not like that one. Meaning Bia, the uniqueness of Bia is not the same as Kesef. Kesef is not the same as Bia. Hatzad hashaveh shebehen. What's the common denominator between Kesef and Bia? Shekonin bialma, that in general they can be used for kinyanim. V'konin kanin, they can be used over here in terms of kiddushin. Afani avi chuppah, so too I should include chuppah. Shekona bialma can be used as a kinyan in general. V'kona kanin, it should be able to be used as a kinyan in terms of kiddushin. But the Gemara still says ma'ala tzad hashaveh sheben. But what's unique about the tzad hashaveh? Meaning, what's unique about kesef and bia? Shekein hanoas and meruba, that there's a great benefit. Again, the kesef can make a person wealthy. The bia is a physical pleasure. So maybe we cannot learn our chuppah from kesef and bia. But the Gemara says shtar yochiach. But shtar can prove the other way. But the Gemara says shtar is also unique. Ma'ala shtar shekein motzi bebas Yisrael. Shtar is unique because it can be used for gerish and it can be used for divorce. Kesef ubia yochichu, but kesef and bia prove the other way. They cannot be used for divorce. Again, v'chazar adin, we go back and forth. Lo roizeh karoizeh, v'lo roizeh karoizeh. This one is not like this one, and this one is not like that one. Hatzad hashaveh sheben. What's the common denominator? Shekonin bialma v'konin kan. That in general they can be used for kinyanim, and they can be used for a kinyan over here by kiddushin. Afani avi chuppah shekona bialma v'kona kan. So I can also include chuppah, just like it makes a kinyan in general. It can make a kinyan over here, meaning to say it can work for kiddushin. But the Gemara still says Ma'ala tzad hashaveh shebehen shekein yeshnan bal karchach. But what is common in terms of the common denominator? In terms of kesef, shtar, and bia, they can all be used bal karcha. They can all be used against her will in some fashion, and that's not true by chuppah. But the Gemara says to that, for Rav Huna, now Rav Huna will respond to that. He'll say that it's not true. They can't all be used against their will. That's why we can make this tzad hashaveh properly, because kesef mia biishus lo eshkechan bal karcha, as we said in the previous Amud, even though kesef can be used against her will, that's not by ishus. That's not by a marriage situation. That's by a situation of an amo ha'ivriya. That's by a situation of a slave. And so therefore kesef is not something that's bal karcha by ishus, and therefore that's not a part of the tzad hashaveh, and it doesn't ruin the tzad hashaveh, and instead we say that the tzad hashaveh is just like they are konin bialma and they're konin kan, so to chuppah in general can be used as a kinyan, and it can be effective over here by kiddushin. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Shtei Tshuvas B'davar, I have two responses to Rav Huna. How can Rav Huna say that chuppah creates a kinyan kiddushin? Chada, number one, the shalosh tnan v'dalad lo tnan. In the Mishnah it says there are 3 ways to create kiddushin. It doesn't say there are 4 ways to create kiddushin. So how can Rav Huna say that chuppah creates kiddushin? How can he say there's a 4th way? V'yod, and further, klum chuppah gomeres el al yedei kiddushin. When we say that chuppah completes the kinyan and creates an isuin, that's only if you have a kiddushin first. And the whole limud of Rav Huna is, if we find that chuppah can be gomeres, so too it should also create a kiddushin. But how can you say that? Can you learn that chuppah works without a kiddushin? Meaning chuppah on its own creates a kinyan kiddushin, even though there wasn't a kiddushin ahead of time. You can learn that out from chuppah, which completes a kinyan where there already was a kiddushin. You can't learn that out. How are we learning out that chuppah creates kiddushin? Amar le Abaye, so Abaye said to him, to Rava, I can respond to both of your teshuvas. Hadaka amrit gimel tanan v'dalad lo tanan. That which you say, that the Mishnah says there are 3 ways to do kiddushin and not 4 ways to do kiddushin. Tana milsa dechsiva behedya katani milsa delochsiva behedya lo katani. The Tana is only listing things that are written, that are learned from the Torah, things that are not written explicitly, that we're not listing, but there is a 4th, even though that is not written, but there is a 4th way to do kiddushin, even though it's not included in the Mishnah. Udekah amrit, and that which you're saying, klum chuppah gomeres el al yedei kiddushin, that chuppah we only find it's gomeres in combination after after you already have a Kiddushin, so therefore we shouldn't be able to learn out that chuppah can create a Kiddushin. But Rav Huna nami hachi kamar, that's really what Rav Huna meant all along. He meant to say as follows: Uma kesef she'ino gomer achar kesef. If we find that kesef cannot complete the nisuin after you have Kiddushin through kesef, kona, but the kesef is able to do Kiddushin, so chuppah shegomeres achar kesef. If chuppah can complete the marriage after there's a Kiddushin through kesef, eino din shatikna. Wouldn't it make sense also that the chuppah can create the kinyan in the first place, can create the Kiddushin in the first place? And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Ketzad bekesef, how does Kiddushin work with kesef? Nasan la kesef, o shava kesef. He gives her money or something that's valued, that has a value of money. V'yomar lon, he says to her, Hareyad mekudeshesli, you are mekudeshes to me. Hareyad muresesli, hareyad li into, you're muresesli, you're going to be my wife. Harezu mekudeshes. All of those languages work, and she is mekudeshes. Avol hi shenosna v'amrahi, but if she were to give it, and she said, Hareini mekudeshes loch, I'm mekudeshes to you. Hareini muresses loch, I'm muresses to you. Hareini loch into, I'm to you as a wife. Eina mekudeshes, that would not create a good Kiddushin. Mazgiv lo Rav Papa asks on this, Taimo de nosan hu v'yomar hu. It sounds like you're saying that the reason the Kiddushin is effective is because he gives the money and he makes the statement. Hanasan hu v'amrahi, but let's say he were to give the money and she were to make the statement. Eina mekudeshes, so it sounds like you're saying that would not be a good Kiddushin. It has to be that he's giving the money and he's making the declaration. However, ema seifa, but if that's the case, now let's look at the end of your statement. Aval hi shenosna lo v'amrahi, but if she gives it to him and she makes the declaration, lo have a Kiddushin, it says it's not a Kiddushin. So that sounds like Taima de nosnahi v'amrahi. Sounds like it's only bad because she did both, because she gave it and because she made the declaration, because she said, she made the statement. Hanasan hu v'amrahi. So it implies that if he would have given the Kiddushin, but she would make the statement, have a Kiddushin, then it sounds like it would be a Kiddushin. It's a contradiction between the Reisha and the Seifa. And the Gemara answers, Reisha dafka, really the beginning of the Brisa, that's what you should take literally, meaning to say, specifically it has to be that he gives and he makes the statement. And Seifa Kedei Naspa, the Seifa is just kind of phrased along the same formulation as the Reisha, but it's not meant to be taken meant to be taken literally. And the Gemara says, V'tani Seifa Milsa, the Sasra al Reisha, but would we really learn something in the Seifa that if you would take the words of the Seifa, it would end up contradicting the Reisha? And so the Gemara says, Ela rather Hachikamar, this is what it means to say. Nasan hu v'yamar hu, if he gives and he says and he makes the statement, so pshita to have a Kiddushin. That's obvious that it is a Kiddushin. Nasan hu v'amrahi, but then what the Brisa goes on to say is, if he gave the Kiddushin and she made the statement, nasa kamisha nasnahi v'amrahi, that's the same thing as if she would have given it and she would make the statement, v'lo have a Kiddushin, and that would not be a good Kiddushin. V'ibay same, if you want, I could say another approach, nasan hu v'yamar hu mikudeshes, if he gives the kesef and he makes the statement, it's a good Kiddushin. Nasnahi v'amrahi eina mikudeshes, if she gives it and she makes the statement, it's not a good Kiddushin. Nasan hu v'amrahi, but what about the middle case, if he gives the Kiddushin and she makes the statement, sveikahi, that's actually in the category of a suffix, there's a doubt about that case, v'chayshinan midrabanan, on a drabanan level, we would be strict. And Rashi explains, Vitona Seifa Milsa Desastra Laresha, can you really say that the end of the Brisa, the end of the Tosefta, would be contradicting the beginning? Bitmiya, that doesn't make sense. When we say something is just brought in Kedei Nazba, Midi Delo Itzrich Lemisnia, that just means something that you didn't need to teach us. Vitanya Bichdi, and so it's written even though it wasn't really necessary. Aval Seifa Desastra Laresha, but to bring the Seifa, that the Seifa should contradict the Resha, Lo Tani Tana, that the Tana wouldn't do. And so then the Gemara said, Hachikam our Seifa, here's really what the Seifa means. If you change it all from what we said, for example, he gives it and she says the statement, that's the same thing as if she gave it and she made the statement, that would not be a good Kiddushin, because we need to have, it has to be it has to be coming from the man. And then the other approach was that in a case where he gives, but she makes the statement, so in that situation we would have a chashash on a derabanan level. What does that mean that we're concerned on a derabanan level? That let's say somebody else would come and now give her Kiddushin, and she had, in the first Kiddushin, it was he that gave the kesef and she made the statement, there was a suffix, so there we'd have a suffix over there in the second Kiddushin. Tzricha get mishneim, she'd need to get a get from both of them. Shemaloa yushala rishon Kiddushin, maybe the first Kiddushin wasn't good, v'chalo Kiddushay sheni, maybe the second Kiddushin was there for chal, or shemashal rishon Kiddushin v'lo shal sheni, maybe the first one was a Kiddushin and not the second one, so in that case we would have to be strict. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, B'kiddushin, when it comes to Kiddushin, nasan la kesef v'shav kesef, if he gives her money or something that has the value of money, v'yamar lo haread mekudeshes, haread mureses, haread leintu, and he says to her haread mekudeshes, or haread mureses, or haread leintu, and the point is he leaves out the word li, that's still going to be effective. Harezu mekudeshes, she is mekudeshes, that's considered a good Kiddushin. Hareini ishech, hareini balech, hareini arusech, but if he says, I am your husband, I am your orus, so in those situations he's referring to himself, not to her, ein kan beis mechush, there's no concern whatsoever, it is certainly not a Kiddushin in such a case. V'chein begerushin, the same applies by gerushin. Nasan la v'yamar la, if he gives her the get and he says to her, haread meshulachas, haread megureshes, haread muteres l'chol adam, he makes those statements, you're sent away, you're divorced, you're muteres to anyone, harezu megureshes, that's considered a good divorce. But eini ishech, but if he refers to himself, eini ishech, eini balech, eini arusech, I'm not your husband, I'm not your baal, I'm not your orus, ein kan beis mechush, there's nothing to be concerned about. Again, that is certainly not going to be a divorce. Amar le Rav Papa li Abaya, Rav Papa said to Abaya, L'meimra, does this mean to say, to Savar Shmuel, that Shmuel holds, Yadayim shein mochichos, that if you have handles that aren't clear, having Yadayim, that's still considered to be Yadayim, meaning over here, you have a statement that's not 100% clear, but still we can interpret that statement and we say that he meant to say, Hareat mikudeshes li, and that counts, that's what it sounds like Shmuel is saying. But we learned in a Mishnah, Ha'omer aha, harei zen nazir. If the person says aha, that's a way of saying that I'm a nazir. V'havinon, but we ask on that Mishnah makes no sense. How does aha have anything to do with nazirus? V'dilma aha b'tainis cover. Maybe what he's saying is I'm going to fast. Who says he's saying that I'm going to become a nazir? V'yamar Shmuel, and Shmuel said v'hu shehaya nazir over lefanav. It only applies if a nazir is walking in front of him. If a nazir is walking in front of him and he says aha, so he's essentially saying I want to be like him. I want to be a nazir. And so we can understand from Shmuel's statement, time the nazir over lefanav. The reason why it's effective is because the nazir is right in front of him, and otherwise it would be considered apparently yadayim shein mochichos. It wouldn't be clear, and it would not be effective. Halav hachi, if not for that, lo, no, it wouldn't be good. So it sounds like a contradiction in Shmuel. Here it sounds like yadayim shein mochichos are not yadayim. And the Gemara says, Hacha b'mayaskina, no, here what are we talking about? When Shmuel says that he says Hareat Mekudeshes, the Amar li, he actually does say the word li. It's not that he just says Hareat Mekudeshes. That would not be good enough because Shmuel holds Yadayim Shein Mochichos are not Yadayim. But the cases over here are that he says the full statement Hareat Mekudeshes li. But the Gemara says, if so, my kamashman, what's Shmuel teaching us? It's so obvious that it's a good Kiddushin. And the Gemara says, Hani these, and the Gemara will go on to explain what the Chiddush of Shmuel is. We'll take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, B'kiddushin nasan, when it comes to Kiddushin, if he gives it to her, Mishum dekaboy lememar seifa b'geirushin, since he's going to say the halacha by Geirushin, so that's why, nasan la, so nakat kiyai lishna, that's why he says, by Kiddushin, if he does this, etc., and by Geirushin, if he does it like this, etc., Hareat Mekudeshes v'lo garsin on li, again in the initial statement of Shmuel, it's just Hareat Mekudeshes without li, ein kan beis mechush, then you had the cases where he's referring to himself, meaning the husband, so there it's not going to be a concern at all. Ein kan afilu safek Kiddushin, it's not even a doubt of Kiddushin. It has to be that he's taking her, not the other way around. With the Geirushin ein kan beis mechush, also by divorce, it's not considered even the scent of a divorce. Afla posla lekahuna, doesn't even disqualify her from the kahuna. Yadayim shein mochichos beis yad achizas hadavra. Yadayim means to say like a handle. Afa bisha eina mochiach, even though it's not a clear handle. Achizas lashon gomer, meaning it's not a clear language. Kihacha, like over here, the ka'amar hareat mekudeshes v'lo ka'amar laman. He's saying you're mekudeshes, but not saying to whom. So apparently, having yadayim, that counts. V'yamar delididei kitcha, we understand that to mean that he's being mekadesh her to him. Aha means ehya, I will be. Shaya nazir over lefanav. Shmuel explained there was a nazir in front of him when he said aha. The vadai ehya afani, because the ka'amar there, it's obvious what he means. He means I want to be like this individual. Alma be'inan hochacha. So you see from there that Shmuel holds that it has to be clear, it has to be obvious, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Vav Amud Aleph.